Hey BC Boom family, it's Gerlisa. It is now April and we are moving into a new series that's all about justice and that's all about God's goodness. This is one of my favorite topics because in the Bible it says that we serve a just God, a God that is full of fairness, and He is a God that pushes us to be followers or believers that pursue justice and that pursue peace. As we move into a very political, heightened time right now, justice is the thing that we stand on because our God serves us with fairness, and He expects us to serve those that are around us with justice and with love. So as our ministry partners move into this topic, I hope that you have your notebook and your pen ready and that you take as many notes as possible so that you can develop into a person that knows what is good and a person that knows what is just, and to follow the character of God. Stay tuned.
What's up? I'm Shane. I want to talk about something I think we all know to be true. I mean, isn't it true that there are well-known signs for when something is really good? Like when I think about a brand new album that just has that beat, you know what I'm talking about? Like you start making that face like something stinks, like, and you just kind of vibe. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, maybe that's just my thing. I don't know what your thing is, but we all know that generally it's pretty easy to recognize when something is good. I might make a stink face when it comes to music, but when God created the earth, God knew that things like light, the sky, water, birds, plants, and especially human were all good things. We see it recorded by the author of Genesis in Genesis 1:31. It reads like this: "Then God looked over all He had made, and He saw that it was very good." God was able to look around at the world and notice that the various details in creation were good. You have to imagine that God was just going, making the stink face. We do the same thing. When we consider the world, we're able to notice when things are good and when things are not good. Usually when we notice that things aren't good, we wish someone could or would do something about it. When things aren't good, we can tell that things are off balance, that something just isn't quite right. And that's exactly what it's like to notice injustice. When I say that word injustice, what comes to mind? We should probably start with some definitions. Justice simply means something is right, fair, or equal. When things are good. Injustice is just the opposite of that. When things are not good, not fair, not equal at all. So, when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in our world that are not right, unfair, or unequal. But you didn't actually need me to define it, did you? Of course not. No, for most of us, something came to mind the minute that you heard the word. Maybe you witnessed someone experiencing prejudice, or maybe you saw people purposely choosing not to care how their actions might impact the environment around them. Maybe it was something local that feels so unfair and it's right around the corner from you. Or maybe you're experiencing a kind of injustice personally, and you know the pain all too deeply. Or maybe you've made it to a side of TikTok that over time has helped you see an injustice that you've never experienced personally. Look, what I'm getting at is that when we hear the word injustice, something comes to mind for all of us. In fact, that's one of the things that I love and I really admire about your generation. You all, maybe more than any other generation in history, you're aware of injustices happening all over the world. Now, the real question we all face is not, does injustice exist? The question is, why doesn't somebody actually do something about all of these not good things in the world? And that's the question that we're going to be wrestling with for the rest of this series. What does it look like, and whose job is it to do something about injustice, to help turn things from bad to good? Now, as we get started, I have to admit, a conversation like this, it can be really tricky because so many of us see and experience injustice in different ways. For some of you, this feels so heavy. You've been thinking about injustice for a long time, and you know why? It's because you've experienced it yourself. You've seen how it's affected your family and your friends. This topic hurts for you, and if that is you, let me stop right here and say this. I'm so sorry. What you're walking through or what you've walked through, it isn't okay. And if you take anything away from this message today, let it be that here We do not ignore things that hurt each other. We want this to be a safe place where you can not only talk about your real life experience, but where you can find real friends who love and support you through it. Now, on the other hand, some of you have never experienced the hurt of injustice. Instead, maybe you feel surprised by it. Maybe when you were younger, you never thought about things like access to education or racism or food insecurity. And maybe as you're getting older and starting to see some things on social media, you feel like you keep discovering things that you never knew about the world around you. And maybe you've even found yourself asking the question, why doesn't somebody do something about that? Maybe you've even found yourself asking some questions that you've never asked before. Questions like, why are there some students that never get in trouble when they should get in trouble, while other students always get in trouble even if they're not doing anything wrong? Or maybe a question like, why do people still act like it's okay to make jokes that are racist, sexist, or ableist? Or why does that kid continue to get bullied and no one seems to care enough to help put a stop to it? Maybe it's a question like, why does one person in our friend group go home to a house that feels unsafe while others don't even have to worry about it? Or maybe, why are there so many little kids in our community who don't get to eat on days when there's no school? Why are 3 meals a day not normal for everyone? My point is this. When we see injustice, whether that's through our own experience or someone else's experience, it should make us ask some hard questions. It should make us wonder how others don't see it or how we didn't see it before. It's not that we don't care about injustice. I just think that sometimes we don't do anything about injustice because we don't always get close enough to see what's actually happening and then ask the hard questions. And I want you to know that we aren't the first people to have this problem. In fact, Jesus made a habit of pointing out a lot of things that people hadn't noticed before. One of the questions people asked Jesus a lot was, so who's good with you and who definitely is not good with you? Okay, maybe they didn't say it exactly like that, but they asked Jesus this kind of question in a lot of different ways. And I want you to check out his response in this specific situation. Remember, the question presented to Jesus was something like, who's doing good? Who's doing what's right or what's best in your eyes? And who's doing wrong? Or maybe the way we would say it is, who's not seeing the injustice around them? Look at what he says to differentiate between good and not good. For I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. In this story, Jesus is distinguishing between justice and injustice. There are those who are choosing to do good and those who are missing it. He makes the distinction by how they responded to the needs of the least of these, whom Jesus defined as prisoners, the hungry, the sick, and strangers. In other words, people who need the most help. People who feel the most pain or get the worst treatment. Now, those situations might seem a little bit extreme, but remember the level of shock that was expressed in their response to Jesus. They basically look and go, when did we not see you? When did we not clothe you or feed you or give you water? It's as if they're saying, not me, I'd never do that. But this is an important note because I know it sounded like it as we read the scripture. It sounded as though Jesus was talking about himself, but Jesus wasn't referring to himself specifically. He wanted to make a point. Not only did you not do something about the injustice, but you didn't even see it. And when you don't see those who need your help, you're not just missing out on seeing injustice. When we don't see it, it's as if we don't understand what it means to follow Jesus. Remember, this whole conversation Jesus is having really has everything to do with forms of justice and injustice. And he is very clear about the answer. God's people are people who notice and act when it comes to injustice. Noticing injustice and working toward restoring situations to good. I'm not saying that good deeds are what it takes to start a relationship with Jesus or to begin to follow him. I want to be really, really clear on that. There's nothing you can do to earn or deserve his love or that makes you like good or in good with God. That's all about what God's done for you. But here's what I am saying. I'm saying that as you get to know God, you'll see that Jesus always cares about injustice, always speaks up for others, and always fights for what's right. And if you follow him, you'll become more like God in that way because Jesus shows us exactly what God is like. You'll begin to care about the things that God cares about. And because of Jesus' example, you may begin to see injustice differently than you ever have before. You may be compelled to do something more than ever before. Don't worry, we'll talk more about exactly how to do some good over the next few weeks. But for now, for this week, let's just start with one thing that we all have to realize before we work on turning things from bad to good. Justice says good enough isn't good enough. And here's what I mean. That realization is where we need to start. We need to be able to make a conscious choice that when it comes to working against injustice, we can't just settle. And we definitely can't just settle for good enough. We need to be able to notice the injustices in our daily, ordinary world and then decide that these instances deserve our full effort and our full attention. We all have room to grow in this, including me. I mean, sometimes settling is just easier. Sometimes just doing good enough seems like it should count as a good try. But when it comes to how people are valued and treated, we've got to do better than just good enough. So, here are 3 simple things that we can do together to take steps toward this. First, get close enough to notice. I mean, how do we begin to do this? Well, there are a few things that we can do. For starters, we could pray that God would help us see the way that God sees. Then, spend some time with people who are different from you. And I want to note that this doesn't come naturally to any of us. I mean, we all naturally gravitate toward people who are like us. It's a normal part of being human. But in order to notice what's going on in the world, we have to get to know people in the world, not just people in our circle. So, get close enough to notice. Start a conversation with someone in your class. Sit next to someone who's different from you in the cafeteria. Maybe even get a job that helps you meet people outside of your school. You could volunteer somewhere. You could put yourself on the path to interact with different people. I mean, these are all ways to get close enough to other people to see the world from someone else's eyes. And then, in addition to that, you can also make an effort to learn about others' experiences on your own. Maybe you want to watch a movie about injustice, or maybe you want to do some research on organizations who are working to help work against injustice. Just start discovering what's happening in the world and in your community. And the second step I think we could all take is to be curious and listen. The quickest way to notice and understand injustice is to listen to people who are experiencing it. When someone tells you about experiencing injustice, listen. And don't just listen, but really try to learn. I mean, imagine yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're saying, and then here's a heads up. It's gonna make you uncomfortable. In fact, I would almost say it should make you uncomfortable. That's how you know you're actually doing it, especially if it's a kind of injustice that you've never experienced, or worse, the kind that you didn't realize that you may have participated in. This is when the conversation gets real, and it may be tempting to bail at this step. It's like this survival instinct. We're wired to avoid being uncomfortable. I mean, some of us, including me, we feel completely overwhelmed about the idea of actually having to talk to somebody on the phone instead of text. It's still not my favorite. Ever let anybody go to voicemail? Okay, that's not what we're talking about. But why do we do this? Because it's uncomfortable, and we dislike being uncomfortable. But in this case, discomfort isn't necessarily bad. It's actually a good sign when we're learning from people and we hear about the difficult experiences they've had with injustice, because those are bad things, and bad things make us uncomfortable. Bad things, unfair things, unequal things should make you uncomfortable because you know what good looks like. That means that you're beginning to notice things that God wouldn't consider to be good. So keep listening. Try to learn. And when you hear about injustice, be curious, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable. Be curious about your own experience too. You might notice that you've experienced an injustice, but you've brushed it off because everybody around you keeps saying like it's no big deal, or because you don't want to draw attention to it, which totally makes sense. Maybe you'll notice that you've actually participated in injustice without realizing it. You can't know what you'll discover until you get curious. So my encouragement to you is to be open to what God might be showing you. And then the third step I'd encourage all of us to take is to be courageous enough to name it. That means if it's wrong, say it's wrong. If it's unfair, call it that. When you notice injustice around you or even in you or because of something that you've done, be courageous enough to call it what it is. Identifying injustice takes away some of its power because we can't change what we don't notice, acknowledge, or talk about. This may be the hardest part for you. It's risky, it's awkward, and it's definitely another one of those uncomfortable moments, but it's important. Because once we name injustice, we feel ownership and the responsibility to do something about it. Listen, so much of following Jesus is learning to see, think, and live in a way that is not natural to us. One of the things that I love about this generation, about your generation, is that so many of you actually see and care about injustice more than previous generations. So here's what I'm getting at. You can be the generation to do something more than just making situations good enough. And actually doing the work, getting uncomfortable enough, taking the steps to making them good. You can bring good to areas where it has seemed impossible, but the first step to doing good is noticing when things aren't good and helping others notice it too. That's why we have groups. It's in groups that we can talk about real and difficult stuff and help each other notice things that we haven't noticed before. In fact, your small group leader is a great person to talk to as you're processing and discovering new ways to notice where in the world you can help turn things from bad to good. So when you head to groups, I want you to think about this quote from Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou was a famous writer who wrote about injustice pretty often. This is what she writes. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. That's what this series is all about. Learning more so we can know better and ultimately do more good.
I hope that was really, really good for you. I hope that you took a lot of notes and that you understand that we serve a good God. And because He is good, the things that go on around us, we are called to do something about it. We are called to do something good, to help someone else around, and to lay our lives down and to be selfless Christians that mimic the character of God. I hope that you find an opportunity this week to do something good for someone and to think of someone other than yourself and to be selfless and to be open to praying and seeking opportunities for justice. I hope you have a great week.